I'm going to read my notes to you. So first I'm going to start with Assalamu alaikum. Dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades in struggle against Iranian expansionism in the Middle East, I have the pleasure and honor of speaking in your presence, representing South Azerbaijani Independence Party. Please accept my greetings from South Azerbaijan, a country which is not on the radar of most of scholars and researchers, political activists, and human rights organizations in the world, and even here. Well, for here, maybe until now. Allow me to give a brief report on the land and people of South Azerbaijan. Historical Azerbaijani territory is from the northwest regions of Caspian Sea towards west to Ukraine, stretching south, encompassing the entire Caucasus, covering west of present Turkey, north of present Iraq, and northwest of present Iran. Among its important cities and centers are Tabriz, Baku, Urmia, and Maragha. After over 200 years of setbacks and defeats, and tremendous loss of land under pressure of occupying armies of Russia and her stooges Armenia and Iran, at the present time the only independent land is the internationally recognized Republic of Azerbaijan. The Republic of Azerbaijan is one of the progressive and prosperous countries of the world. Unfortunately, from 1990s, Russian forces using Armenia and Iran and Armenian forces and ultra-nationalists with their ultra-nationalist claims over Azerbaijani territory occupied over 20% of the land and committed ethnic cleansing and massacres in the great scope against Azerbaijani people. The conflict is known as Karabakh conflict in the media. In the beginning of 20th century, and after the collapse of Azerbaijani-based Qajar Empire, and after the military coup of Reza Shah, South Azerbaijan became de facto occupied by Iranian Persian army. Reza Shah created a country based on Persian Aryan ideology and Shia sect of Islam. All other identities, languages, and beliefs were banned and prosecuted. The occupation and massacres of South Azerbaijanis continued under Second Pahlavi times until he was deposed and left the country. He escaped. After the so-called Islamic Revolution and coming to the power of bloodthirsty mullahs, the regime of occupation and destruction of South Azerbaijan continued and intensified. Over the course of the last century, millions of South Azerbaijanis were assimilated, exiled, imprisoned, tortured, and killed, both under Pahlavis and under so-called Islamic regime. After South Azerbaijanis lost their territorial integrity and national rights to Persian Iranian occupying forces, there have been many uprisings in different scales against Persian domination. All uprisings, including a one-year-old democratic national government of Azerbaijan under Sayyid Jafar Pishavari in 1945-1946, is put down and destroyed by Iranian Persian regime. The very name of Azerbaijan is taken away from fictitious fictitious provinces created under different names in Iran. The idea is to separate the land into many pieces and take the name of Azerbaijan from them. The education, media, business, and communication is banned in Turkish, the Azerbaijani language, the Azerbaijani Turkish, the mother tongue of South Azerbaijan. Ladies and gentlemen, especially from 1979, under the terrorist regime of Iran, over 30 million inhabitants of South Azerbaijan are systematically being destroyed as a nation. The South Azerbaijani land is also being destroyed by systematic dehydration and eco-destruction of Lake Urmu. In the prison of people called Iran, all non-Persians and non-Shias are treated as second and third citizens under occupation in their own land. Turks, Arabs of Al-Ahwaz, Turkmens, Baluchs, and Kurds are suffering from the same oppression and from the same evil. Iran, Persia. This is the real example of a destruction of a nation from face of the earth and history. This is the real genocide. Now that we see how is Iran from inside, literally prison of peoples, let's take a look at Iran's foreign policies, especially in the region. So let's look at Iran from outside too. From Pahlavi's time, Iran aspired to be the bully or so-called gendarme of the Middle East. That's what Iran was called. This, of course, was possible by the blessing of US and allies, United States and allies. For 57 years of Pahlavi era, Iran was giving the latest and most advanced weapons in the region. Arabs, Turks, and other nations were supposed to be wary of the mighty Iran and equip themselves, spending billions of dollars in the face of Iranian possible aggression. Mohammad Reza Shah, the king of kings, or what his non-Persian opponents called him, America's chained dog, had to tuck his tail between his hind legs and run away in 1979. Run from peoples to his enablers to no avail. He was expired, and the so-called West had new ideas for the region. The so-called and so aborted revolution of 1979 brought to the power of group of vigilantes a certain species of pseudo-Muslim criminal-minded pervert mullahs who has no respect to life and nature, a human and people. They are so apocalyptic in their 12-er Shia ideology that they almost want this world to be immersed in every kind of disaster for their savior to come. This is how abhorring their worldview is. Add to this terrorists, missiles, bombs, and nuclear capabilities, and that is your doomsday prescription. In 1979, when Khomeini became the Imam and Vilayat-e-Faqih, claims that not warranted and or substantiated by Islam outlined the true and real tenets of the new Persian Shia empire. Export the evolution. That was the Iran's mantra at that time. Export the revolution. He meant to infect the mostly Arab and Turkish region with the Persian Shia virus. The real agenda behind this was to create more tension and violence in the region, to divide the region into sectarian lines, to import the delusional ideologies of Persian historical greatness and mixed with Shiism, to shake the region with new waves of violence, militarism, sacrificing millions to prepare the great disaster for the coming of the hidden and promised Imam Mahdi, and to export this poisonous mentality to use of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Yemen, Bahrain, and elsewhere. Khomeini, from the first weeks of coming to power, set the policy of intervention in the affairs of the region's countries. He openly identified among his enemies Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and almost all neighbors. His ideology respects no borders. As in his many speeches that set the foreign policy of Iran, the Persian Shia influence has been grown in the region and is the cause of many problems in the region. This, of course, would never be possible without Russian and Chinese backings and American blessings. As the Christian club in the Europe and US are more benefited and profited, both strategically and economically, if over 1 billion non-Persian and non-Shia Muslims in the world are so occupied with the evil threats from the meddlings of Iran in their affairs, equipped with nuclear capabilities and ambitions of death to this country and death to that country. This is disastrous in our region. I always wonder when the Muslims of the world when they will wake up to defy the death cult of mullahs of Iran. 8 years war with Iraq, then taking control of it, after little help from Uncle Sam's troops, dividing Iraq to sectarian lines, creating new entities like Kurdistan and Sunni areas and Shia areas, manipulating anti-Sunni and anti-Muslim sentiments, taking control of Syrian minority, the Alawis governments, interfering managing armies like Hezbollah in Lebanon, creating the army of Quds, that is Iran's army in our region, in Arabic region especially. I want to mention more than 50,000 Iranian special forces under the name of Sepah Quds, means army of Qudus. Qudus they call it Jerusalem, is in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and even in Sudan and in a secret plain clothes in Turkey and Azerbaijan and other places. Quds army specialized in interfering in the neighboring countries and the world, sending terrorists to assassinate Iraqi pilots, torture and kill many dissidents abroad, Russian style, interfering in internal affairs of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and supporting, arming distant Shia groups in Yemen of Zaydis and Houthis, causing millions of deaths, destruction, suffering, and instilling fear in the region. This is the product of so-called Islamic Republic of Iran. Coming to recent events in Yemen, thanks to Arab coalition and countries of Arabian Gulf and allies under the leadership of Saudi Arabia, now parts of south of Yemen is liberated. City of Aden is under legal authority of Yemeni government. And the tide of events has changed, of course. Now, after 37 years of implementation of Iranian expansionist policies, someone put an end and stop to Iranian expansionism. It is late, but it's still enough to make Iran understand that peoples of the region are fed up with the pain and suffering of Iranian expansionist policies. What Iranian terrorist regime planned was that they could control the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, so they can have a hand on the throat of the oil and energy routes in the region. But fortunately, the operation's decisive storm and restoring hope, Iran's imperialistic dreams are turned to nightmares. What I think is what I wish Saudi Arabia and coalition should defy Iranian expansionism when they were landing cargo planes in Yemen years ago, carrying parts of Scud missiles and all other goods of war to the hands of the Houthis. When Iran was sending tens of thousands of special forces, Sepah Quds, to Iraq to create Sadr's army, Mahdi's army, Hezbollah, Sudan, Lebanon, Bahrain, and Emirat, and many others, Operation Decisive Storm and Restoring Hope is a turning point in Iranian expansionism in the region. Even though it was late, but it is crucial in the region's history. I hope the same would be in the other Arab lands too. Personally, and literally under Iranian occupation, namely Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, US and allies, Russians and Chinese, have always benefited from tension in our region. Of course, they can sell us more of those modern and updated, and then again more modern and updated weapons, and or not so modern weaponry, reserving the real lethal ones for themselves, and Israel, of course. creating more ethnic